Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from Matthews, Virginia. Having a great time at Cornerstone Fellowship. We were here Sunday morning, Sunday night. We'll be back Wednesday morning and Wednesday night. It's amazing how hungry people are. It's wonderful to be in the churches. Thank God we can get together and meet. I believe we'll be able to more and more. If you're anywhere near the Kansas City area, we'll be in Denver, Missouri this weekend at Lone Star Church, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It'll be Sunday morning only. Come by, we'll have a great time. There's nothing like being in person, hearing the Word of God. The incorruptible seed, when it's sown, it grows up and it becomes. So here at the update, we're looking at things every single week that point to the coming of the Lord, specifically the gathering of nations for the Ezekiel 38 war, because the rapture is signless, but the second coming has tons of signs. But we know the rapture is about 7 or 8 years before the second coming. So if we can look and see what happens just after the rapture, it gives us a little bit closer of a timetable. And in the past, we were taught that you can't tell when the Lord's coming back, yet there's more verses to show us what it would look like so that we'd know. Why would the Lord do that? So we'd have a heads up. You think about it, Paul talked about the baptism 12 times, coming of the Lord 52 times. For every verse there is about the first coming, 8 times more about the second coming. So all the documentation is so we'd have a heads up. So let's look at what's happened around Israel. Man, so much has happened, and so much I even forgot about last week, so I'm going to try to bring us up to speed. I mean, last week you had a lunar eclipse, solar eclipse on 4th of July, kind of mirroring the unrest that's in America, the founding of our nation, the United States of America. More stuff to that, but that is kind of crazy to have that happen. I didn't even get into it. We had an asteroid come by the Earth, didn't get into that. But this is what probably is the most amazing thing that happened this last week. You had 7 more explosions in Tehran. Remember how it looked like Iran was getting ready with their enriching of uranium to have a nuclear weapon ready? Well, man, Israel planted a bomb. First they said it was a fire, then they said it was a gas leak, and it looks like specific bombs were set up all over Tehran. It looks like the nuclear facility in Natanz is 75% wiped out. Now, that's a big deal because you got Iran sponsoring all this stuff that is a wake-up call for the Middle East. I mean, you had Iranian-sponsored Houthis in Yemen fire missiles at Saudi Arabia again. Saudi Arabia blocked some of them with their Patriot batteries that America gave to them. So you have Iran kind of doing, this is what they called it yesterday in the Middle East media, was a preemptive run-up to what Iran's going to try to do to Israel. I mean, it's kind of weird when they show their cards. I mean, the Ayatollah Khomeini is the one that said Israel is the rabid dog that has to be removed from the Middle East. So you see the activity of that happening right in front of you. In fact, an Israeli watchdog this last week came out with a showing of Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah is a terrorist organization to the north of Israel in Lebanon, and they showed 28 new missile launching sites in Beirut. Notice where they put them. They put them by schools, they put them by hospitals, they put them by fast food restaurants, they put them by soccer fields, by golf courses. They put their own civilians as human shields so they can fire these missiles off. Even in southern Lebanon, if you go down from Beirut and get almost to the border of Israel, there was missile launching sites at their command and control places, missile depots. It was crazy to see what's set up all over the region to fire at Israel. Now, what they've done is they've retrofitted those missiles with guidance systems that they didn't have 10 years ago. That's why Israel's having to preemptively strike those convoys that are coming down from the north headed toward Israel. Israel's had to do that so many times in the last 3 months, I almost can't even keep up with how many times. Now, there's not really any mention of that at all in the U.S. press. But you got so many things like that going on, along with in Iceland, you had 13,000 earthquakes happen in 3 weeks. I mean, there's just activity all over the earth. Just like with the eclipses that you had on the Ring of Fire, you got heavenly activity, you got earthly activity, and you got activity of nations, just like Turkey working with Russia right now in Syria. Remember how we talked about Turkey? I love how the news media in the Middle East said that Turkey looks as though, this is secular news media, looks as though they're setting up a plan to annihilate Israel. They're around them in Libya, around them in Syria, around them in Iraq. Something else Turkey did that I thought was pretty wild. This was a big deal in the Jerusalem Post. Erdogan, which is the president of Turkey, changed one of the churches in Turkey that's been there from the 1300s. It's turned into a museum in the last 100 years, but converted it back to a mosque. And this is what he said. He said, we've converted this church to a mosque, but what we're getting ready to do is go get the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. This is what he said, we will call on Islam to ascend to the Temple Mount and take the mosque from Israel. So You're seeing the true colors from Iran, seeing true colors from Turkey, seeing true colors from everybody because Jesus is just about to come back. This is what you'd see would be the setup for the nations around Israel because this is what's going to happen right after the rapture. Now, I hear people say, well, why would we want to know about the coming of the Lord? What's the big deal? Well, tell a quarterback in the last 2 minutes of a game not to show him the play clock. No, the plays are more crucial at the very end. And Jesus rebuked the disciples. He said, hey, you can, actually the crowd, he said, you can tell what the weather's going to be, but you don't know your hour of visitation. So he wants us to know why. We accelerate as we see the finish line. We don't slow down. This is not an escape theology. This is, wow, there's the finish line. We've got to do more in a shorter period of time. Now, many things keep happening all around Israel that it's hard to even get into. The stuff that's happening with Judea and Samaria. You had in America, Mississippi, a Satanist group in Mississippi is trying to keep from having God on the flag in Mississippi. You had 31 states pass anti-boycott, divestment, and sanction against Israel. That's 31 of the 50 states. Why is that a big deal? Because you had France this last week say, we're going to boycott Israel over Judea and Samaria. Everything is going to go back to the borders that were won in the Six-Day War. You're watching a push for that all over the earth because Jesus is about to come back. But let's pick up what the Scripture says. There's many signs we can look at, and we run through them every week. Why? Because they're blatant, they're exact, they're precise, and they show us where we are and how close we are to the coming of the Lord. Number one, Israel made a nation. Number two, Jerusalem won back. Jesus said the group of people that sees those two events will not pass away till all is fulfilled. So then you have the Hebrew language restored. You got the Ethiopian Jews brought back. You got the fertility of the land of Israel. You got the revival of the Roman Empire. You got 172 different species of predatory birds. You got fish showing up in the Dead Sea. That was prophesied 2,500 years ago. When did that happen? Last year, 2019. You had foxes show up on the Temple Mount. I mean, you had crazy. The ritual baths around the Temple Mount fill up with water. First time in 2,000 years. You had Rabbi Itzhak Kaduri that got saved. Jesus appeared to him. He wrote in a letter that this letter was to be opened a year after he'd gone home to be with the Lord. And in that letter, he prophesied that Israel will be ruled by two Benjamins right before the coming of the Lord. Benjamin Netanyahu, Benjamin Gantz, 4 weeks ago, decided to rule together because of COVID. And it's just so wild watching everyone fight Benjamin Netanyahu over trying to protect the land of Israel. It's crazy. So you have all the stuff happening that point to the coming of the Lord. Those are signs. Many, many more. Men will be lovers themselves. We have selfie sticks. That's crazy. But you have all these tangible physical things to look at to go, wow, that's preaching to me and communicating to me that the King's coming back. So what's the Lord? Why does the Lord want us to know this stuff for? Great joy. Paul wrote these things about the rapture so that you'd have great hope and great joy and great expectancy. This is the time to be happier and more expectant than you've ever been. Like when you're getting married, if your wife-to-be is walking down the aisle, you don't want her going, oh my God, I'm about to marry that guy. No, you want her excited. The church has to get this mentality that the King's about to come back. I've heard people say, well, we've been hearing that all of our lives. That's what Peter said. You'd be saying that. Where is the promise of his coming? Well, we're saying that because he's about to come back. But then you've got signs, you've got signals. You had the blood red moons on Passover and Tabernacles, 4 in a row a few years ago. When's the last time you had 4 in a row? It's called a tetrad. 1967 when Jerusalem was won back. 1948 when Israel was made a nation. 1492 at the Edict of Expulsion when the Jews were kicked out of Spain. So signs in the heavens tied with massive things happening with Israel. Then you had the Bethlehem Star this last year. You don't hear a lot of preaching about that, but that's radical. First time in 2,000 years those planets came together. And the constellations was Virgo at the birth of Jesus. This last time it was Leo. He's the lion of the tribe of Judah. And then you've got, I mean, this is the crazy one. You've got midway through President Trump's presidency on the January 21st, you had a blood moon, supermoon, wolf moon. When Trump was born, you had a blood red moon. 700 days later, Israel's made a nation. When Trump was elected president of the United States, Benjamin Netanyahu had been in office 7 years, 7 months, 7 days. When Trump was inaugurated, he was 70 years old, 7 months, 7 days. Moved the embassy to Jerusalem after 70 years. Pretty radical. Now, this is the crazy thing. The name of the president and the vice president of the United States mean the coming of the Lord. Trumpets. Jesus is coming back on Feast of Trumpets. When you say Trump and Pence, trumpets, you're saying the timing of the coming of God to the planet. So there's all kinds of things in play here. Jesus is just about to come back. So what do? Help our local church, help our local pastor, be more engaged. When you're getting ready to get married, it's called being engaged. You talk more, not less. Spend more time with the King than you've ever done before and pray more than you've ever prayed. Let's get a harvest as radical as we can right here before the coming of the Lord. How privileged are we to all of a sudden get ready to go from faith to sight? We're so blessed. Well, we'll come back next week and look at all the stuff that's happened with earthquakes, look at all the stuff that's happened around Israel and with Iran, because Jesus is about to come back. Have a Have a great, awesome week. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the edu at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out, or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.